Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Making Partnerships Happen. It's an orientation to Wraparound. We're so glad that everyone's here this morning and are ready to learn about Wraparound. My name is Joanne Huss, and I'm one of the presenters that will be presenting to you this morning. And now I'm going to introduce you to...
Hi, my name is Kim Eastep, and I'm one of your presenters this morning. Good morning. And I'll be co-presenting with Joanne today. So we want to start off with talking about turtles, which may seem a little odd given that we're talking about Wraparound, but it's kind of our mascot. And we know a lot of things about turtles. We know that they carry their house around with them, that they might be slow, but they usually win the race, or slow and steady wins the race. And the thing about turtles that's really cool, though, is, and how it relates to Wraparound, is that in order for turtles to move forward, they have to stick their necks out. And so in Wraparound, sometimes we have to stick our necks out and do things that might feel odd or not be something that we learned in school or something that we're comfortable with. But we always want to remember that sometimes in order to get forward and to help in the partnership with families to make sure that they're getting the things that they need, we sometimes have to stick our necks out. And so we're going to talk a lot about that throughout the presentation and hope that you take that to heart a little bit when you go out into the world and take risks and stick your neck out for the families that you partner with. So now we're going to move on and talk about why we're here today. And I believe Joanne was going to talk about this.
I am going to talk about this. And I think this is a really important one for everyone to remember. For those of you in the audience that are more research-minded, this is something that should stay with you along your careers. It's something that is very useful in Wraparound and one of the premises that Wraparound was built upon, but also in any other type of work you end up doing in children's mental health and juvenile justice and child welfare, whatever field you decide to end up even private practice. These are really important elements that we want and hope that you remember. This was actually done several years ago by Dr. John Whitbeck in the state of Washington, who did a research project looking for the reasons why outcomes tended to vary. And his interest was, what are the three elements that are necessary when we have good outcomes with children and families? And sent his researchers out to do the project and was really surprised by what came back with the research. And actually retested to make sure that it was valid and came back with the same thing. And these are really three important things to remember. There were not the expected, certain clinical interventions seemed to work better. If there was more money available for the project, things to work better. What was really clear across the board were that there were three elements, and those elements were access, voice, and ownership. And when we talk about access, we are really talking about the ability to ensure that parents and youth have access to the people or processes in which decisions are being made, that they have access to be included from the very beginning. They have a voice, they're listened to, their voice is included in whatever is going on about planning for their child. They also, for youth and families, there is a voice and they're heard and listened to at all phases. But what that actually produces is ownership. And if you really think about it, it's true for any of us. If we are included from the very beginning in any kind of planning or decision-making, and if we're being heard all along, our voice is being heard, then we tend to buy in more and own the project, and this is true of youth and families. And so as you move forward and you think about what's important, keep these key elements in the back of your mind, because it really does make a difference in any kind of services or supports that are being provided to youth and families.
So Wraparound creates certain possibilities that might not be available or sometimes not available in other sorts of processes or supports or services that are available. And it really is a way to help systems organize differently to support families in different ways than they have before. Also partnering with families in a different way through this process and looking beyond the behaviors that sometimes are presented, and sometimes the behaviors are really big, and we get caught up in the severity of the behavior or things that are going on, and we don't stop and pause for a second and look at why a youth might need to act that way or why those things or that situation might be going on. Wraparound also creates a way for us to move from a professional-driven service delivery system to really a partnership with families. And just like Joanne just spoke about with regard to access, voice, and ownership, families are included in every aspect of Wraparound, and their voice is crucial to moving things forward and to getting things done. And we don't meet without the family and the youth, and so we're all doing that together. And we're focusing on the family in the context of their home, the youth in the context of school, and again, the family in the context of their community that they live in. Wraparound also is inclusive of kind of non-traditional helpers, those folks that are not paid to care, if you will, who support the family when things are going well, those people that they call when they have good news to share, or those people that are there when maybe things aren't going so well. And really purposefully looking for those folks and trying to include them in the process to help move things along a little bit. It generates a lot more creativity in the process, a lot more options, and really makes a difference in the plans and how things roll out for families involved in Wraparound. So then we're going to talk about, or now we're going to talk about the principles of Wraparound, of which there are 10. Joanne, I don't know if you want to start with family voice and choice.
Sure, near and dear to my heart, family voice and choice. You'll see it right there at the center because it is really the center of wraparound planning. And again, it talks about, when we talk about this principle, we're really talking about that families and youth are included in that the planning is done around their preferences, both culturally and family values, and really are at the heart of planning. I hear a lot as I go around and train on wraparound, and I hear people say, well, we don't have family involved, or, that the family's rights have been terminated, or they're not involved. So what I want you to think about as you're moving forward with this is that sometimes families aren't able to be present, but it doesn't mean that when a child leaves services or turns 18 that they won't be involved in a family, and that's our hope. So we always need to consider the child's cultural background, their connections, sometimes not bio family, but sometimes aunt, uncle, grandparents. Those are the people that we really want to include and have their voice heard in wraparound planning. Kim, do you want to take the next one?
So with regard to individualization, I think that there's been a shift in the past few years, at least from when I first started, where we're looking at each individual family that we're partnering with and working with them in a way that's meaningful, specific to them. And so a lot of times in our communities and in the work that we do, we kind of have this bookshelf of services and supports. And every family that meets a certain criteria or has a certain diagnosis or something like that, we tend to pull from that bookshelf. And all of those families get those certain things. And that doesn't necessarily work for all families, or maybe they've tried that before. And so in Wraparound, when we talk about individualizing it just for the family, we're really looking at what are the beliefs and the traditions, the culture of the family, and what's important to them, and how do we begin to tailor services? How do we make them more creative and get those professional people maybe to do something a little bit different? To really create things that are meaningful for families and letting them guide the way of, yes, this is going to work, or no, we've tried that before and it didn't work then, so I'm not sure we really want to do that again. And are we listening and really creating those things that are tailor-made for the particular needs of the families that we're partnering with and the youth? And Wraparound is also a strengths-based process with, and you hear this also a lot, and I hear a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, strengths-based. My youth really, or the youth that I'm working with, really enjoys basketball. So let's get them involved in the community and play some ball. And that's great, and it's fun. But we really want to begin to broaden that a little bit and make it a little bigger, where when we first get that referral and we're thinking about the families and the youth and how we're going to work with them, even though still criteria to maybe get into care, there's still a lot of the behaviors and a lot of things that are going wrong, but how do we begin to see the strength in that? So it's not just a crisis moment or a traumatic event that's happened, but it's how did the family cope beyond that? Like, what did they do in response? And what are they good at? Who did they turn to? And really, really shifting the focus to look for some of those things as we're working with families and changing our perspective a little bit, that the families we partner with are more than the sum of their issues or challenges that they're bringing to the table, but really have worked hard and have tried lots of things and have supports around them to get them where they are. So now Joanne's going to talk about natural support.
Well, and, Kim, I know you would agree with this if, and I know Eric agrees with this, and for our class participants as you go through these weeks of learning about Wraparound, one of the things that will be very clear to you is that a lot of times Wraparound teams struggle with developing natural supports. This is a biggie, because the whole idea about Wraparound is that we are building natural supports for families so that those natural supports will be there once we're gone, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that family will really be able to draw on what they've learned in Wraparound and what they've developed as far as natural supports to be able to maintain the successes that they have gained during the Wraparound process. So when we talk about natural supports, we're really talking about, the team, the Wraparound team, child and family team, really actively seeking out and encouraging full participation of team members drawn from family members' networks and, their community relationships, coaches, teachers, people that are probably sometimes surprising, that have been supportive of that family or that youth during the process. And I know as a family member, it was very difficult for me in the very beginning to be able to reach out for those natural supports, because your inclination is to say, no, I don't want folks to know my business. I don't want to have people involved in this. And it's really a shift in thinking that, you're going to have these people in your life forever, and those are the people that are really going to be able to support you long after the paid supporters are gone. The next value is really that of collaboration. And again, if you think about Wraparound, it's all about collaboration. It's about bringing a group or a team of folks together, coming up with a plan, and getting people on the team to really learn how to collaborate. And sometimes that's difficult when you have child welfare mandates on the family that things that have to be done, or juvenile justice mandates that have to be done. And we talk about collaboration, and it's sometimes, for systems folks, it's a whole new learning process. And but when you really think about it, being able to share the responsibility makes the work easier. It also makes it more effective by building those collaborations and really being able to support one another. And by support one another, I'm talking about everyone that's involved in a wraparound team, the family, the youth, care coordinators, systems folks, or anyone else of national support that happens to be on the team. Kim, do you want to talk about unconditional care?
Sure. It's one of my favorite things to talk about when we talk about the principles of Wraparound, because I feel like in this age of Medicare and billing for services and things like that, that we have a tendency to put labels sometimes around issues of non-compliance or no-shows and that kind of thing. And for Wraparound, it really is about, and I feel like this would apply to most human services, is that it's our job to, as the support people, the care coordinators, the facilitators, to engage the family. And it's not the family's job to engage us. And so when these issues come up, it's up to us to really look at our behavior as the helpers and, these facilitators and care coordinators of what are we doing that might not seem beneficial to families. And I think Joanne probably could speak to this as well, that they're going to engage in the things that are meaningful for them. And particularly for youth where there are some significant behaviors going on that, they're doing the best that they can. And if they don't feel that it's going to be helpful, then why participate? And so this notion of unconditional care is that we're going to continue to be there no matter, what is going on with regard to behaviors or how tough it may seem, but also that we're going to recognize that we play a role in this and reach out to the family and make sure that we're listening to what they need and not just coming in with solutions, and thinking about those traditional terms of noncompliance and no-shows and what does that mean when we're working with families in Wraparound, and how do we address some of those barriers to that. And along with that is also the notion of community-based, and we have to own that as care coordinators and facilitators, supervisors, anybody working in Wraparound, the belief that youth do better when they're with the people that care about them, in the communities that they grew up in the areas that they're familiar with, the schools where all of their friends go, and making a commitment to not only that unconditional care, but also maintaining that place where they are comfortable in the community, and working really hard to do that, especially Friday at 5 when you get that crisis call. Are we still we're operating under the same commitment to community-based care as we would if it was Monday morning at 8 o'clock. And that's really important because the families that call at 5 o'clock on Friday deserve that same support as they do Monday morning at 8 o'clock. And Joanne, I don't know if you have anything to add or if you wanted to move on to culturally competent.
Yeah, I think you covered it, Sam. I do want to say something about, go back to when you were talking about unconditional care. Sometimes you'll see it labeled as persistent. And I know a lot of us that have been doing RAP for a long time, we're not real keen on the idea of calling it persistent because we really viewed it from the beginning. We're taught from the beginning that it's unconditional care. And one thing I just want to mention that happens so often to youth and families is that when you've got a child or youth with big behaviors, or if you're a family that has big behaviors, that you're so used to getting kicked out of services or, moved along because it's either the youth is too difficult or the family's too difficult or people can't figure it out. And so you're so used to, just kind of going through services. And we know that the outcomes when that happens are really dismal. So, the beauty of it, this unconditional care or persistence principle is that, people don't give up on you. They stay with you. And that ties right into the culturally competent value because when we talk about culturally competent, we're talking about all of the things that you would think of when you're talking about cultural competence, but it's also the family and the youth own culture. There were times when I sat in on wraparound teams and I had maybe a family that had in their culture had an open kitchen where the youth would, come to the meeting and would be in and out of the kitchen constantly. And, as professionals come in and sit with families in their own home, it's a totally different environment. And people might tend to judge, well, why can't that mom have her children sit down and sit here with us in this meeting instead of going in and out of the kitchen? Well, that's her culture. Another example might be a family that tends to yell a lot or that, that their way of communicating is more chaotic than not. People tend to judge, and they don't consider that necessarily culture, but it is. It is a family's culture. So we've got to be really careful when we're talking about this principle that we consider not only the normal things you think about when you're talking about being culturally competent, but also the family's own culture and the way they relate to the world, the way they are in their environment, and that we are guests in their home. We are really about supporting them, and so being able to be fully present and participating with them and not let our biases get in the way. The next principle of team-based we already talked a little bit about by making sure that in collaboration. And really, again, here's making sure that we get all the people involved that need to be involved. Oftentimes we'll find in wraparound teams that, we'll go along and we'll do the engagement and go to the planning phase and that we've absolutely missed someone that is essential or crucial to be part of the team. And then we end up having to go back and modify and adjust to really make the plan work better. And so it's important in the beginning as we're meeting with the family and we're talking to all the players that are involved to find out information that allows us to be able to identify people that can actually be part of the team and really help do crucial planning that needs to happen. Kim, do you want to talk about the last one, outcome-based?
Thank you. I would also like to add with regard to team-based that I think sometimes as human service workers filling the roles of facilitators or care coordinators, if that's the model that folks are using for wraparound implementation, they have this tendency to, and I get it because they're trained to do this, but they go into a home and kind of assess the situation, and they want to make this assessment of what's going on, and then all of a sudden they want to jump to, okay, here's how you fix it. And I think it's really important for us to take a step back from that and really listening to the family and honoring the team process and the decision-making is happening in a team, that we're stepping back from that need to go in and assess the situation and fix it ourselves, that the ideas and all of that are taken into the team. And then as a team, we're going to monitor, are things changing? And that's when we move into this notion of outcome-based, that the team is really asking themselves, are the behaviors changing? Are they turning to the family and saying, hey, tell us, are things getting better? And if they're not, then we need to change what we're doing and making sure that we're constantly doing that and remembering that just because we plug a service or support in or think that we, got that magic bullet that's going to help, that just because that gets plugged in doesn't mean that things are getting better or that behaviors are changing. And so the team needs to constantly be monitoring those behaviors and asking, are we any closer to need met? Are we any closer to the family's vision? And as a team, how are we working together? And that's really important when we're thinking about team and monitoring those outcomes as a team. Did you want to add anything, Joanne?
Yeah, I do. I think, what you said about outcomes is absolutely true. And I think, what often happens is, there are so many big behaviors or crises going on. And, the family's stressed, the youth is stressed, and people tend to jump in with solutions and throw the whole planning process of wraparound out the door to, mediate what they might consider an immediate crisis. And, the whole idea of wraparound is being able to help the family and the youth be able to do it on their own. And when we jump in and try and fix things, oftentimes that doesn't happen. And the other thing, as a family member, what I felt and what I've heard so much from other families is that oftentimes the whole process of wraparound and sitting in a team meeting when you have a child in crisis can be a real challenge because, you're wanting to see action. You want to see things happen. You want to see things getting better. And if families are feeling that they're sitting in a wraparound team meeting and all they're doing is talking about the problem and we don't have action steps developed and people are not out there really trying to mediate some of the crises that are continuing to happen, families disengage. And so it's a really crucial piece to remember that while we're doing the planning process, we want to make sure that we're helping the crises that are continuing to happen because they will get better and move forward, and that we're not forgetting about, the real day-to-day lives of youth and families.
And
want to take it, Kim?
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. So, what is wraparound? Now that we've talked about the principles, wraparound really isn't a service. It is a planning process that looks holistically at what's going on within the family's history and the family's context and their lives. And it's an approach to care planning that, again, builds on the commitment of that team. And just like Joanne and I talked about, the team is a committed group of people that includes family, friends, community partners, professionals, cross-system support, that all come together to mobilize all of their resources. And recognizing that we all bring something to the table, and how are we going to use those resources that are available to us, the creativity, the ideas that we have to support the family, and as a team create a plan of care that is the best fit between where the family wants to go, which is their vision, the context of their lives, so their story, their history, the team mission, the strengths of not only the family but also of the team members and the community in which the family lives, the needs that have been identified, as well as the strategies that we're implementing to meet those needs. And all of those should be a cohesive, or should come together to create a cohesive plan of care, garnering the commitment and continuing to build on the strengths of the community and team as they move forward. So we're familiar with lots of, maybe team decision-making models or person-centered practices, but there are some things that make wraparound unique. And we've identified 4 key elements that should be present. The first of those is grounded in a strengths perspective. And here on the, it's denoted by this muscle. So, you're having a hard time remembering this, just know that, ball your fists up and make a muscle, and we're all in this together. And we're really grounded in a strengths perspective. And again, it's not just the strengths of the family, but we're also including the strengths of the team members, the strengths of the community, and really building off of what everyone does well. And we all have strengths to bring to the table. The second element that makes Wraparound unique from other team decision-making models or person-centered models is this notion of driven by underlying needs. And so we're going to denote that with a little car, right? So we're driving, what is driving the behaviors? And really seeking to understand why someone would need to act this way, and how does it make sense given the context of their lives? So, for instance, if a youth is maybe refusing to go to school, then we really want to look at the reasons why. Like, why is it that a youth may not want to go to school? And there's lots of them. But what really doesn't work is just telling the youth to go. Because if we just could say, you need to go to school, and if that worked, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be in Wraparound. So we're continually looking for those underlying reasons why and trying to understand this behavior to begin to address some of those things. The third element that makes Wraparound unique is that it is supported by an effective team process. And we cannot, and I can't emphasize this enough, move forward, call it Wraparound, whatever you will, without a team. It's a non-negotiable. We've got to build it. And it really does make a difference. And in my years of doing this, there's a big difference between those teams that, or what they would like, what some facilitators would like to call teams, where it's just a facilitator and a family. And really that's just, some sophisticated case management. But we've got to build a team. And it needs to be supported by this process that is facilitated and mediated by the care coordinator or facilitator. And the fourth element that makes Wraparound unique from other practices is that it is determined by families, that they are part of the decision-making, that their voices are heard, that it's integrated into this process, and they're seen as equals on the team, that they're not being railroaded or told what to do, but really a part of this decision-making process. And so for Wraparound to be considered both fidelity and quality practice, all four of these elements need to be present at the same time. And so that's really what places WRAP in a unique place. And we need to be cognizant of those as we move forward in this process. So Wraparound is also built on this notion of it's a holistic process, and built around the Ecological Framework, which has been around for a long time. And I think as human service workers, we're really good at that bottom bubble, that microsystem level, which is the youth and their caregivers, their parents. I think we're really good at getting information about that immediate environment and making assessments and trying to figure out what's going on. We're really good at that. As we begin to move up this bubble, however, we start to lose out a little bit. So in the mesosystem, that's the relationships between the systems and the microsystem. And then in the exosystem, it's things that aren't directly involving the youth, but still impact things that are going on. And an example of that could be that if I have a bad day at work and I go home, my bad day at work is absolutely going to impact my relationship with my child. And so as we're working with families in Wraparound, we need to look for those kinds of things that the youth doesn't have direct contact with, but still going to impact what's going on in their life. And then we have the macro system, which is this broad ideology and culture that we also need to recognize and pay attention to. It's going to impact how families view mental health, how they feel about medication, who they want at the table, who are the decision makers in their family, who are key players that if missing, nothing's really going to move forward. And we have to make sure that we're getting that information and really looking beyond race and religion, but what are the traditions of that particular family? What is their belief system? And then also we need to pay attention to the chrono system, which are changes in the environment over time. And we know, an example of this, we know that in families where divorce has occurred, it'll typically impact the daughter immediately. But for boys, it's been shown that it takes about a year. And so after about a year, then things start to get a little, maybe a little out of control, where you're seeing behaviors that you didn't see before, even though it's a year later. And we need to pay attention to that and making sure that we're gathering that information. Joanne, did you want to add anything about that?
Good, Kim, you've got it.
So we're going to move on and talk about the phases of wraparound, and there are 4 phases. The first is engagement and team preparation, which we've separated into phase 1A and 1B. They happen simultaneously, but it's easier to kind of talk about as 2 separate actions or things that the facilitator would actually do. In phase 2, you're going to develop your initial plan. So that's where all the strategizing and things begin to happen. Phase 3 is implementation of the plan of care that the team has put together, and how are they monitoring and continuing to move things forward. And then phase 4 is transition, and these things are all happening over time. So in phase 1A, in the engagement phase, it's traditionally 2 to 3 face-to-face meetings with the family prior to the first child and family team meeting. So in a Medicaid world, it's about 14 days from referral to your first child and family team meeting. If you aren't bound by Medicaid rules and regulations, no more than 30 days from referral to your child and family team meeting. And so, remember we discussed the 4 key elements that make wraparound unique. And those were grounded in a strengths perspective, driven by underlying needs, supported by an effective team process, and determined by family. And within that, what we found is that while each of those needs to be represented for a fidelity and quality process, they could be open for interpretation of what does that mean as a facilitator, of what do I actually do, and how do I go out there and do the day-to-day work. So what we've identified are essential process components for each phase of wraparound that are connected back to those 4 key elements to ensure that they're all happening. And so we've identified 4 key or essential activities, kind of those macro level activities that need to happen within each phase. So for phase 1, the first of those is that we're going to gather the family's story, the family's history, and we're going to start by gathering that from the family, and then we also want to find out what other perspectives are. So those other team members, the national support, the service providers that have been providing service to the family, what are those perspectives? And how do they blend all of that information together to come up with how the family has coped, how have they gotten here and survived? What are their capabilities? What are their interests? What are the skills that they're bringing to the table? And that essential process component is connected back to the key element of grounded in a strengths perspective. So the second key element that we want to ensure occurs as the facilitator or care coordinator is that we want to take that story and that information that we've gained and thoughtfully try to figure out, like, why are these behaviors going on? What is the meaning behind this situation or this behavior? And how do we place it in the context of this story? And so it's not about justifying the behavior, but it is about understanding where it came from. And that's one of the key activities that a facilitator needs to do in phase one. And that is connected to driven by underlying needs in our key elements. The third activity that's essential to phase one is that the family's perspective around success are going to be summarized and reflected to the team. And the team needs to understand the roles and expectations. What is wraparound? And it's crucial to make sure that not only do the parents and the youth understand what's going to happen in wraparound and what the roles are, but also that we're prepping the team for that. And it makes your meetings run a lot better when you can do that. And that is connected back to supported by an effective team process. And the final essential process component for phase one is, again, that we really want to ensure that we are listening to the story, the family's story, and we're listening for their traditions, their beliefs, their culture, and forming a response that's appropriate to that. And that is connected to the key element of determined by family. So, Joanne, did you want to talk about the next one?
Sure. As we go through the training, I think what's important for all of you to notice is that oftentimes after each one of the sections we'll have something about what parents feel or what parents say. And again, my role is unique, probably in the process of receiving services, although not as unique as it used to be, 15 years ago when I first started out doing this. But you're going to be sharing the perspective of the parent, and my role is that of a parent who's had a child that's received mental health services, but also as a parent who has been employed within Wraparound to support other parents based on my experience, so my lived experience. And so as I talk to you after each one of our phases, I really want to point out to you what's different about Wraparound from a parent's perspective. And with engagement, really what parents say is this seems different. And I know for myself the biggest difference between Wraparound and categorical services is the way service is delivered. So if you would think about normally a child's enrolled in services, the parent takes the child to the first meeting. They're told to wait out in their waiting room. The clinician or service provider has read the chart about all the things that supposedly have happened. They recognize a diagnosis or multiple diagnoses, and often kids that are involved in RAP have multiple diagnoses. They tell the family that they can meet with their child between normal business hours, but they're closed on Saturday and Sunday, and they don't have evening appointments. And there's really no one to support that parent. So as a parent, for myself, I remember sitting out in the waiting room dying, just thinking, oh my gosh, how will this ever get better? What can I do? You've got someone in there trying to help my child, but what about me? How do I deal with this? How do I deal with the up and down emotions of what's going on? So with Wraparound, what you hear parents say is, as opposed to categorical services, is that this process is about my entire family, not just my child, because oftentimes families have more than one child, and everyone's involved in what's going on with that identified child. We all in a family experience the turmoil, the chaos, the heartache that goes on when a child is first diagnosed or first manifests, what I call big behaviors. The other thing that's different, families will say that their opinion and how we got here matters. I know for myself, with my child, I was never asked about who I was, what I did, how we got to the point that we got to, what had happened before. When I tried to volunteer information, I was told that they had read whatever there was in the chart. And, my idea was, well, what if the chart isn't accurate? So families really noticed that this is different. Previous to Wraparound, I think services are all about the diagnosis. Okay, if this child has an ADHD diagnosis or a bipolar diagnosis or whatever it happens to be, here's the treatment we're going to provide. And in Wraparound, we didn't talk a lot about the diagnosis. We talked more about the behaviors and the needs, and then the really surprising thing and the thing that really kind of took me over the top was when we really talked about the strengths of not only my child, but also the whole family. And then the other thing that's different is that Wraparound teams meet when families can meet, oftentimes in the family's own home, if that's convenient for the family, but not in a sterile office under someone else's terms, but really in a place that's convenient and comfortable for the family and really for everyone that's involved in the team, and convenient. Sometimes 7 o'clock at night or on a weekend. And then the really crucial piece for me, and one that I'm really passionate about, is that there was someone else who had raised a child like mine that was able to provide parent-peer support. And you'll hear this called lots of different things: a family partner, a parent partner, parent-peer support partner. I was brought up with parent partners, so sometimes I'll flip and use the old terminology of parent partner, but it's someone who's had the lived experience. And for parents, when they meet someone that has actually walked in their shoes and had the same experiences, it changes and reframes services and the way that they're going to be different, and they can really say, this is a different process. Part of the Phase 1 team prep is really families don't want to be overwhelmed by people and the services and too much talking and not enough help. When your child is really struggling and the behaviors are so over the top that the information that comes at you from professionals sometimes just goes over your head. You can't hear it. You're in too much distress at that point. I'm sure you all know that whenever you're in kind of a crisis situation, that if someone tries to give you step-by-step instructions on how to do things or what's going to happen next, don't remember it because you're too overwhelmed. Families say that's true as well. Also, a lot of times families' confusion or their caution in the beginning, or apathy or even resistance is viewed as families not wanting to be engaged. And, you have to think about that when kids get to the Wraparound front door, that a lot of times families have been through multiple services. Unfortunately, Wraparound tends to be for kids with at the top of the pyramid when it comes to intensity of services. And so families have often been through multiple services, oftentimes residential, sometimes probation, and they're done. They have no reason to believe that this process is going to be any different. And so don't confuse their resistance with apathy or really not wanting to be involved. Having others know that they love their child and their attitude may come from being overwhelmed is really important to families. Everyone knows that when you're close to someone and trust is broken or they behave in a way that you're not used to, that you kind of step back and look at it. And oftentimes with families, it's viewed as, well, the family doesn't care about the child. It's not true. It's just that they're overwhelmed and they're really not sure what direction to go in. And then families knowing that they're not alone in the journey, that there's other people, a team, there's parent-peer support, really enables them to feel hopeful again. And, you know, the key word here is hopeful, because when this process happens for families, the last thing that they tend to feel is to be hoping, or to be able to think that things will ever get better, because you really don't think that they will get better. But Wraparound brings a whole different viewpoint. Tim?
So we're moving into phase 2, which is the initial plan development. And this typically would occur in one child and family team meeting. But if the meeting ends up going a little long, or people are getting tired, you may need to roll it over into a second meeting. But those meetings should be very close together and no more than a week apart, because this is where the work is starting. This is where this plan of action is getting put in place. And we need to do that as quickly as we can to begin to move things forward. And so for phase 2, again, there's these essential process components that are kind of those macro level activities connected to those 4 key elements of Wraparound. The first of those is that the strength of the family, the team member, and the community are all collected and discussed and mapped to the strategies that are being utilized in the plan of care. And this is crucial because people are more likely to engage in things and do things that they're good at, that they like to do. And this connection between the strengths and the strategies is one of the things that I think makes Wraparound kind of cool. I think it's really cool, and it's one of those things that I like about it. And this is connected to the grounded in a strengths perspective key element. The second thing that needs to happen is that the team is going to continue in this process of understanding those behaviors. And when those big behaviors happen, are we continually looking into the family story and the context in which they're happening to derive meaning from that? And what are those underlying reasons why? And the team is going to work together to continually understand those behaviors, particularly if they're big behaviors. We need to hold to the process even more closely and not get in this crisis response cycle that Joanne referenced earlier. And that is connected to talking about underlying needs, the key element. The third thing that needs to happen, or that the facilitator is responsible for, is that we still want to make sure that the family's voice is, and their interest in this process, is integrated into a team mission, because again, they're equal partners at the table. And that the strategies include the perspectives of all the team members. So the creativity, all of the ideas that happen when you get a group of people together, the notion of 2 brains is better than 1, and hopefully we'll have more than 2 in Wraparound. But that all of those team members' perspectives are brought to the table and collectively strategize and brainstorm lots of options for the family to choose from. And that's connected to the supported by an effective team process. The fourth thing to make sure that happens when we're developing this plan of care in phase 2 of Wraparound is that the family's perspective is critical to success. If we're trying to implement things that haven't worked in the past, they're probably not going to work now. And what I see a lot across the country is that folks, us professionals, we like to think, oh, well, if therapy wasn't really working and they were only doing it 1 time a week, what would happen maybe if we did it twice a week? And that's not really all that helpful, nor is it creative. And really listening to the family when they're like, we haven't really had a lot of success with that particular intervention. Let's try something new. And honoring that and respecting that. And that is connected back to determined by family.
Like Kim said, really, when you think about it, don't get better based on their deficits or their pathology. they get better based on their strengths, what they're doing right. And so as this whole idea of focusing on the strengths, while it may seem strange to be doing when a child or a family is in crisis, it's really what is able to change the direction for the youth and family. They're able to be hopeful again, because when you've got everyone telling you that they don't know how to treat your child, or they're not sure what they can do to make things better, or they increase, as often happens, they continue to increase the level of services that kids are receiving, it just doesn't lead to a very hopeful perspective from a family member. You know, I think for myself as a parent, we were so used to hearing what was going wrong that it was really hard to move forward and be hopeful, or to even want to try anything else. Other piece important to remember is that having others being able to pay attention to worrisome details is really a blessing. I think that, you know, as a family member, when you've got a child that's, you know, busting out windows or raging or hanging around with the wrong people or using drugs or in and out of psychiatric hospitals, and you think that you're the only one that can deal with it, you just want to check out. You're just not quite sure that you can continue the level, especially when you have other children in your home, you have work, you have other things that are expected of you. So by being able to have a team that's really able to tend to some of the, you know, the more significant details of what's going on with your child allows you time to kind of catch your breath and feel that you can move forward. The ability to be respected and your opinions are heard and valued by others on the team is really a whole different way of thinking. I can just tell you just a few times of myself personally of feeling like no one really wanted to hear what I had to say, and yet it was my kid. It was my child. I knew, you know, more about my child than anyone else, so why wouldn't people want to know, you know, what I knew that they could probably do best, and maybe what their reaction was going to be if we tried a certain intervention, especially when those interventions tended not to work, like Kim said, and they would be done over and over again. The other piece is having, as a parent, having your safety concerns addressed by more than just, here, call 911, or something happens, call us. You knew that there were people that would mobilize and would be out and be able to help you move through the crisis, and that really makes a huge difference. Yeah?
So in phase 3, now, in phase 2, remember, we created a plan of care that has mobilized the team, tasks have been assigned, everybody's got some stuff to do, and now we have to monitor the implementation of that plan. And so we're entering phase 3, where the child and family team is going to meet regularly. And typically, it would be a minimum of every 30 days, but I have experienced lots of teams that have met more often. Anybody on the team can call a meeting, so if the family feels like things aren't working or didn't quite work out, then we need to meet next week. You know, if we just had a meeting, then we need to do it again. Maybe a crisis has occurred, and so it is flexible in response, but at minimum we need to meet every 30 days to ensure that things are moving forward in that plan. And so again, with phase 3, there are those essential process components that need to happen. And the first of those is continuing to build on those strengths. Just like Joanne said, are we actively supporting people in the things that they do well, and the supports that are available to them, and continuing to build on that. And again, that connection back to the key elements of ensuring that Wraparound is grounded in a strengths perspective. The second essential process component that needs to happen is, again, as these behaviors might be continuing to occur, because really, remember, even though, Joanne and I have talked a lot, we're still, from a team perspective and a RAP perspective, we're only, maybe 60 days in at this point. It could be 45 days in. So we haven't really been working on things that long, and so these behaviors and the things that got then referred for wraparound might still be going on, and continuing to look for the reasons why and what are those underlying needs, and then adapting those strategies based on that new information that the team is gathering, and that's connected to driven by underlying needs. The third thing that needs to happen in phase 3 is that the team is going to change the strategies if they're not working. So if there are barriers to strategies that maybe weren't there before, is it transportation? Is it financial? What are those barriers, and are we addressing those? Or maybe we just didn't pick the right strategy. Maybe we thought it was a good idea and it really wasn't. Or maybe it's not working, and the family's like, we were willing to try this, but I just don't know about that. And so we're continually modifying and changing if things aren't working, and celebrating the successes of the things that are. And that's connected to supportive and effective team process. The fourth essential thing that needs to happen is that, again, are we listening when the family says, I don't want to do that? I have actually been in team meetings, and much like Joanne was saying that she felt, where family members are like, I'm not really sure about that. We did that before, or I don't want to do that again, or no, I absolutely don't want to do that. And everybody's like, oh, okay. And then somehow it ends up on the plan anyway, and then it doesn't happen because the family didn't want to participate in it. It wasn't something that they thought would be beneficial. And we as workers need to listen to that and making sure that we're aligning with the family preferences, that the strategies that are being brainstormed, that the things that we're discussing, that we're listening and ensuring that the family's preferences and what they feel is going to work for them are the things that are actually being implemented on the plan. Joanne?
So again, during this phase, the most important thing, I think, is that families want to see action. They want to see help happening sooner rather than later. So let's not sit around and talk about the problem. Let's get moving forward. And really, by doing wraparound and having this whole planning process, people know what they're supposed to be doing and how they're going to move forward. The other idea, too, is that knowing that the first plan may not be the best plan, like Tim said. So a lot of times with us as family members, people want to start out in a certain way that maybe we know that may not work, or we kind of have a hunch that it may not work. But we're willing to go along with it because, professionals tend to have the knowledge to be able to help us move forward. But when it doesn't work, we want people to be able to stop and say, hey, wait a minute, this really isn't working. We need to go back to that plan that we did, and we need to modify and adjust. And the beauty about Wraparound is that you're able to modify and adjust, that you're not locked into a concrete plan that's static and not able to change. Wraparound is very fluid. We're able to make changes. We're able to really adjust and fine-tune what works and what doesn't, and figure out if it's not working, what do we need to do different. As family members were asked, is it working? We talked about outcomes. We're able to say, hey, maybe my child's not been hospitalized as much, which I know is an important outcome for professionals on our team, but really at home he's tending to act out, and I really need some help here. So there's other things that people are willing to look at. And as a family member, we're being asked, what can we do differently, and are we making any progress? That's really different than traditional categorical services. It allows family and youth, because this question is also being asked of the youth, is, is it working? Does it feel like things are getting better, or does it feel like things are getting worse? What do we need to do different? What do we need to adjust and modify? And that's how we're able to move forward. So we're going to move into transition now, Kim.
Yay. So in phase 4, which is transition, and transition happens lots of different ways. Sometimes funding runs out. Sometimes there's deadlines for, there's a set time, like 12 months. And we need to be cognizant of that. But the plan should be shifting over time in preparation for transition. So it's not one of those things that should really sneak up on you in a wraparound process. It should be something that the team is actively aware of and planning for. And again, there's essential process components associated with phase 4. And the first of those is that we are making those purposeful connections to community, involving community and strengths of the community, and that the family's preferences of what are those things that are going to stick around, or those things that we can access once the formal process of wraparound ends. Are we continuing to build on that and making those connections prior to transition, which is key, and I can't emphasize that enough, that we don't want to get to the end, and if there is some arbitrary ending point, that we are purposely planning for that and making sure that the strengths of the family and the community and the team have been built on all along, because it's really hard to do that in the last, say, 30 days, where it's like, oh no, now we have to think about this. And if we've made those connections all along, it makes transition a lot easier. And that's connected to the grounded in a strength perspective key element to ensure that that's reflected in phase 4 as well. We also, as a team, want to forecast potential unmet needs. So with wraparound, it's not some magic cure for mental health, or, that struggles or challenges won't happen in the future. But in wraparound, and when families first come to wrap, their needs are exceeding the resources that are available to them. So if you think about that scale, it's a little unbalanced. And what we want to do in wraparound is balance that, where the needs of the family is matched to the supports and services that are available to them, and that they can continue to access those things once wraparound ends. And if, some crisis happens, or a behavior emerges, or something that the family knows what to do, and the team needs to plan for that and forecast those things that could possibly happen. And that, again, is connected to driven by underlying needs. The third thing that we want to monitor is, have we achieved the team mission, as a team, what we were working on for, the past maybe 9 or 10 months or so, and is that achieved, and is the family any closer to the goals or where they wanted to see themselves in the future, their vision for what the outcome would be in wraparound. And that's connected to supported by a team process. And then also is the family saying, I think some of my needs have been met and things have gotten better. And what do they see transition looking like? What are the things that they feel are important to stay connected to? Things that they would like to stay connected to, supports that they may still need, even though the formal process of wraparound is ending. And that's connected to determined by family. And so now Joanna's going to talk about families in this phase.
So this is probably the hardest phase, I think, for families, because you've been doing WRAP, and everything's hunky-dory and moving forward, and all of a sudden, you realize that it's time for a transition, and that even though as a family member you know that things have gotten better, it's hard to let go of people that really have been your support. And I think, with some youth and families, they're able to transition out of wraparound, and move forward and never have to deal with some of the things that they've experienced and challenges again. For most families, and for myself included, that's not the case, especially if you have a child with mental health challenges. And I think what I've learned, and I think what a lot of the families I've worked with have learned, is that you're able to feel that you have the confidence, that you've gained the right skills to really be able to solve problems and manage conflicts. Not always 100%, but certainly a lot better than you may have felt in the beginning. That there's a sense of independence, that your expectations are more realistic. And again, I'll speak to my personal experience. We all, when we have kids, if you're a parent, or when you become a parent, you have this vision that your child will grow up and be a rocket scientist or a neurosurgeon or whatever. And when you first start struggling with behavioral challenges or emotional challenges, it really challenges that dream that you have for what you want for your child. And I think WRAP gives us time to maybe rearrange our thoughts and realize that maybe our dream didn't happen, but it didn't die. It just looks different than what we might have thought for our child in the very beginning. And so we're able to really be hopeful again and to have more realistic expectations about what life might be like with a child growing up with behavioral challenges. And even for myself, with a young adult now, for the most part, things are pretty smooth, but from time to time they get rocky. And when they do, I know what to do. I know how to kick into gear and use the things that I've learned from my wraparound training to really be able to help move our family forward. And so there's that hope. And then there's connection to people, that you've had the support to get through the bumps. And especially a lot of times when the peer support is built, you build connection with other families that have gone through the same experiences as you. And I know it's a huge network for all of us to really be able to have that kind of support in our corner to help us once the transition has happened out of wraparound.
So coordinators or facilitators, and they're sometimes called either one of those, typically are hired through a care management entity or maybe a local provider. And there's there's lots of things that facilitators and care coordinators do, but there's kind of some essential things that they're going to have to do as a deliverer of wraparound. The first of those is that they've got to bring a team of people together and around all of the components of a family's life, inclusive of their history, their culture, their relationships, and really making a commitment to building that team. They also need to facilitate that team in accessing and discussing and utilizing the things that the team is good at. Now remember, the caregiver and the youth are part of that team. So when I'm talking about them facilitating this collective action, we're building off everyone's talents and resources and everything that they bring to the table to lead to an effective team process. That they're working together, mediating conflict if it should arise, ensuring that all of the team members' voices are heard, all as part of a team-based process. They're also going to be gatherers of lots and lots and lots of information and perspectives of all of those different people that are involved as a part of the family's participation in wraparound. They need to have an understanding of community resources and systems and how things work, and partnering with a peer partner or family partner, a parent partner, whichever word, and I'm sorry, I grew up in the family support partner, that was my word, so I struggle with new language too, and as they change things on us and for what people are called. but really bringing all of those people together to create a plan of care that's relevant and addressing the issues that the family wants addressed, the behaviors and things that they're struggling with. And ensuring that that plan of care is the best fit between the family's vision, the team mission, their needs, strengths, and strategies. And how does all that fit together to make sense? So it's not that the family wants to go in one direction and the rest of the team wants to go somewhere else, and maybe the facilitator wants to go in a different direction, but all of it is coming together and being purposely integrated to ensure that we're providing relevant help in this process. And also ensuring that we're supporting and responding to crisis concerns as they arise. Oh, parent care support partner. There's that word that I was looking for, and it's so long. Joanne, I know you have a lot to say about that.
Yeah. So, parent peer support partner, that's really a mouthful. But as tends to happen when things get kind of systematized, they often develop acronyms. And so you'll see there I've got PAPST. Federation of Family is actually undergoing a huge project right now where they're developing competencies and training for parent peer support partners. And like Tim said, you know, if we've been involved in Wraparound for a long time, there's lots of names for this role. But really, think about it. It's a parent providing peer support to another parent. And that's really what it's about. It's someone who has parented a child with a mental, emotional, or behavioral health challenge and is really able to use their lived experience to support another family. So some points to remember about the role, because I'm hopeful that as all of you move forward in your careers, you will have the ability to work with a parent peer support partner. Is that we utilize our personal life experience to provide peer support. And it's done both during meetings and outside of meetings. So not only are our parent peer support partners meeting with families during a wraparound team meeting, but they're also providing support on the outside. There's lots of things that go on that are really similar to what maybe a child and youth specialist might be, or behavioral specialist might be doing with a child. Their role is really to interrupt bias and help reduce stigma with parents and professionals by using their personal life experience. Oftentimes and Kim and Marlene both know this, is that oftentimes I'll use my own experience to kind of make it more personal when I'm trying to interrupt what I might perceive as bias. It's how we are able to kind of situate ourselves in the world. And it really helps others, I think, understand it better because there's some experience behind it. We're also able to provide knowledge and skills to families to navigate the child serving systems. You know, for myself, there was nobody out there to say, call this person, do this. You might be able to get some support here. I kind of had to figure it out on my own. And it's like you're being thrown up in the air, fall back down to the ground, and, you know, stand up and let's figure this out. Well, that parent peer support person is really that support to be able to help the parent move forward. And they're able to provide hope, and they really are able to ensure that the parent's perspective is represented. And this is an important piece because a lot of times in systems, especially in wraparound, if we're working in child welfare, there is no parent present. You know, a parent's rights may have been terminated, or for some other reason they may not be able to be present. But if a parent partner is involved on the team, they're really able to represent a parent's perspective as part of that whole process. Because ultimately the idea is that we want kids to live at home, in families, in the community. And then they're also the piece that I think is so important is that they're able to partner with professionals and provide support and information. I can't tell you how many times I've been able to use my personal life experience with professionals I've worked with to help them kind of understand what might be going on with the family, or why, the family is disengaged, or even why the youth is disengaged. So when we talk, most wraparound projects, or I'm not going to say most, maybe that's my dream, is that most, but a lot of wraparound projects are starting to hire care support partners as just a given. They're just, it's part of the way of doing business. And I know we're, really hoping that this continues to move forward. But what are the benefits? If you're going to hire somebody who is really a paraprofessional, what are the benefits of having them involved in the process? And, you can read here, things that I've already talked about, keeping the process honest, reducing the guilt, shame, and stigma that a parent might feel. And believe me, that's something that is huge for all of us parents. I can talk to parents that have had their kids involved in services 20, 25 years ago, and they still remember the sense of feeling guilty or shame, not really a feeling that people blame them for their child's behavior. It's something that's really a difficult thing to get over, and really having a parent partner involved can really help others see that and help move forward in that, on that venue. They're able to create a sense of urgency. If things aren't happening, they need to start happening, because every day a child's in services is every day a child is really not in school, not in community, oftentimes not in a home. And parent partners can really create that sense of urgency on a team. They're also, and we hear this a lot, considered change agents. Having worked for a large children's mental health provider back in LA, when we started doing Wraparound, it really changed the way that the agency moved forward. They could no longer continue to do traditional residential services or foster care services or in-home services while they were doing Wraparound, because it challenged their values. And really it was having, a staff of 40 parent partners employed that was really able to challenge a lot of the traditional ways of doing things and really move that Wraparound philosophy forward. And so we see parents going in and working within agencies, within organizations, and really being that change agent. And then they, again, help staff understand parent perspective and help parents understand the staff perspective. We've got our two big ideas. Kim, can we do this together?
Sure. I'll take the first one. You can have the second one.
That's good to me.
All right. So I think the partnership between the parent peer support partners and the facilitators or care coordinators of this process is really crucial, because Wraparound was one of the hardest things that I've ever done in my work in human services. It was also the most rewarding, but it was really helpful, and I feel it was more manageable when the responsibility was shared between the two of us. And I think we also held each other accountable for ensuring that the process was moving forward and we were true to the model. And having that person to talk to and bounce ideas off of and walk through a pretty complex process was so helpful in my experience.
I agree. I think, really being able to get teams unstuck and helping them move forward is really hard work, especially when you've got a lot of people coming in from systems that have mandates and demands, and sometimes it really takes you by surprise. And this teaming idea of a care parent support partner and a care coordinator, really being a team and being able to cover each other's back and to step in when needed. I can remember being in a Wraparound team meeting where we had a probation officer come in and actually say we're removing the child today. And while the care coordinator was, facilitating the meeting and trying to make sure that everyone's perspective was being heard, they were flabbergasted and really kind of took their breath away. But by having that partnership and working really as a team, I was able to step in, give her a chance to catch her breath and, figure out how she was going to move to the next idea by being her partner in that team meeting. And while, being a partner, the other piece that you have to understand is that while we work together, we hold two different perspectives. And the ability for both of us to represent the perspective of a family member and of the professional, being able to voice our opinions, being able to discuss it, and being able not to walk away mad or, we're not going to work together anymore, is really a keen skill and ability. That's something that's so necessary, and when it works, it's beautiful, and it really benefits the wraparound team. Should we wrap it up, Kim?
Sure. Go ahead.
You want me to do this one?
Sure.
Okay. So, in conclusion, the ultimate goal of a family's participation in wraparound is to increase the youth and parents' sense of competence, independence, hope, and connection. All of those are important. For me, as a parent, I'd say hope is key, and all the others fall in line after that. How about you, Kim? What's your favorite?
I don't know. I'm torn between the sense of competence and connections, which I guess the competency does, tie into the hope. But it's just so empowering, I think, and to watch that and watch families find their voice and really feel like a partner at the table, and that what they have to say is important, was really cool for me working in wraparound. And so I think that's one of the things that I was drawn to, but also the connections and how disconnected I feel, or I thought that some families were when they first came to wraparound, but being able to help foster and rebuild some of that connection to their community and their family other family members and so on, was also really powerful for me. So those two, I kind of go back and forth between. So I like them all, actually. I do. I can't lie.
Well, we want to thank everyone for joining us today and hearing about our Basics 101 overview of wraparound. We've got references that you'll see listed on the screen now, some of the articles that we have been able to reference, some of the people that have probably been instrumental in both of our lives as we move forward. We also have contact information that will be listed, websites. So folks want to find out more information, there you go with the contact information. And we look forward to meeting with you again as we move forward and more information about wraparound. Thank you so much. Kim?
Thank you all. And yes, we will be blogging with you this week and look forward to your ideas that you get back to us and your thoughts and questions, and we will try to answer them all. Thank you so much.